with Angelina Jolie. John Malkovich is in the film as well. John Malkovich, who plays the person who supports Christine Collins, played by Angelina Jolie. He fights corruption as well in Los Angeles. And here, you've got the producers with the director, Clint Eastwood, Brian Grazer, and it's co-produced by Ron Howard, who came to present the Da Vinci Code here. Robert Lawrence is there as well, who's the regular producer of his films, Eastwood's films. Michael Straczynski wrote the screenplay, and he dug up archives from Los Angeles press and police department to the story which had been forgotten about, and the struggle of Christine Collins, played wonderfully. He's not acting in this film. Clint Eastwood is simply director of The Exchange. When of course you say Clint Eastwood is not a simple director. So again with this film, he's managed to get us to relive this story. This is the town of Los Angeles in the 1920s. But I mean, without necessarily going into historical reconstruction, I mean, you're really caught up by the story, by the emotions. And she really shows us the suffering of this woman.
It is the story of a woman. It's a true story of a woman that went through a terrible ordeal at a time when there was much corruption in the police department of Los Angeles back in the late 20s, and it's very astounding that it is not a fictional story. Because it's like the truth is stranger than fiction. It's kind of that sort of sums this up.
I couldn't put it down, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I didn't necessarily want to do it. I didn't want to experience what that felt like for months, but I couldn't forget it, and I knew that it was I felt that it was an important story to tell and a good story to tell, and then when Clint was doing it, I would do anything that he's doing. But I knew he would also help me through it and make it okay, that somehow it wouldn't be too painful.
It's a very difficult role she had. She had to live through a lot of emotions, always with the thought that this was a real person that had gone through all this at one time, and she's a mother, and of course could be very sympathetic to the situation. But you just don't want a person to have to live through that too much during the day. Like she was mentioning, if you have emotional scenes, I like to catch them when they're before a person has to think too much about it. They kind of just live it, and then if something goes wrong, you repeat it and you do things over. But by and large, I try to get right to it.
As a producer, it's a dream. I mean, quite frankly, you don't really have to do anything. We started with a script. It was a great spec script. It was written by Joe Straczynski, and he just looked through the archives, and it's a true story. And I've always wanted to do something with Clint, and of course Angelina, but I mentioned it to Clint, and he liked the idea and read it on a plane flight actually to France, and called me and said, yeah, it seems like I'd like to do it. And then I was able to relay that information to Angelina, and she said, absolutely.
Actually, I didn't even read it. I just knew Angelina was going to be in it. I figured that's fine. But I think they have changed. It seems like every several decades, Los Angeles goes through a period of upheaval in its law enforcement agencies and through its political process. But and this was, in 1928 was a particularly bad period, and like Angelina was saying, women were barely voting, so it was a different deal, and they didn't want to pay too much attention to her, and everything's 24 hours before we do anything, and it was just a very lackadaisical time, and we still don't know, and nobody will know whether the young boy who is the imposter, whether he was coerced by some underlying organization like the PD, the police department, or whether it was his idea. The speculation is it was his idea, but he did, as depicted in the film, he did blame the police for coercing him into doing this thing, so who knows.